Janet sped down the long stretch of highway that wound its way through the desolate Arizona desert in her blue Subaru. She had not planned on staying at her boyfriend's so late. Normally, she would have just stayed the night, but she had a busy day at work tomorrow, something she couldn't miss. Her boyfriend was already asleep when she left, so she just left him a message once she was on the road. She glanced down at her speedometer as it crept up to 3 digits. It wasn't likely there were cops around. This stretch of road was typically void of them, which would make getting home in quick fashion a possibility. As she drove, she began to notice a light begin to form in the sky, an indistinguishable distance away. She glanced at it, trying to examine it, while also paying attention to the empty road before her. She considered calling her boyfriend again. Maybe he'd be awake and she would have someone to talk to keep her up. The light began to get brighter and brighter, illuminating the dark sky above the desert until it was clear that the light had a point of origin. What looked to be a metallic craft, hurtling towards the earth at a rapid pace. Janet gasped as she realized that it was headed straight for her. She attempted to increase her speed even more so as not to be struck by the falling craft, but it was no use. The craft flew down towards the highway at remarkable speed right at Janet's car as she stared at it, wide-eyed through her moonroof. Seconds before impact, Janet blacked out. She awoke with a start on the same stretch of Arizona highway, still driving. She instinctively jerked the wheel, causing the car to screech with a sudden turn. She slammed on the brakes and looked around. Everything was as dark as she remembered. Remembering the last thing she saw, she quickly jerked her head upwards. The night sky was filled with stars, but no crafts. No mysterious moving lights. No UFOs. She took a moment to catch her breath. I must have fallen asleep at the wheel and dreamed it, she told herself. She was shook at how close she came to crashing due to falling asleep at the wheel. After debating it with herself for some time and texting her boyfriend, she decided the safest move was to lock her doors and sleep in her car for the remainder of the night. She was too far away from home to get home without falling asleep, and too far out from her boyfriend's to go back. The next morning, the sunshine made its way into her car, waking Janet and signaling that it was time to get going. The whole drive home, she kept on thinking about that dream she had with the spacecraft. There was something so strange about it that she just couldn't put a finger on. Work went by fine and she was able to make all of her deadlines. It went exceptionally well, actually. She felt more productive than she had ever been, and she was receiving more praise and credit for her work than she ever had. The following weeks and months went by in the same fashion. She climbed through the ranks of her company, eventually becoming a manager, and then a partner. She worked well with her subordinates and was respected by all. Still, every once in a while she would think of that night. That night she dreamt of the UFO in the Arizona desert. It wasn't long after that when her boyfriend proposed. They had a marvelous wedding with all their friends and family. A perfect day. A perfect beginning. They traveled together, saw all the places they wanted to see, from the Canadian Rockies to the Eiffel Tower to the cliffs of Scotland. And when it was all over, they started a family together. Still, Once every so often, she would think of that UFO she saw that night in the desert. They had 2 kids, a beautiful baby boy and a lovely baby girl. They were shown affection and care and kindness. Eventually, the kids grew up to have successful careers and families of their own. And in their old age, Janet and her husband looked back on their younger days with nostalgia and contentment. They had done everything they wanted to do, saw everything they wanted to see. One day, her husband was looking into her eyes when he saw a quick flash of what seemed to be sadness. Or was it fear? "What's wrong, dear?" he asked softly. Janet debated telling him what she had seen so many years ago, but decided against it. Just thinking about our younger years, how fast everything moves. Her husband kissed her forehead. "We may be old now, but look at what we accomplished together." A few weeks later, Janet's husband passed away in his sleep, and Janet was admitted to the hospital. Her body was finally failing her. She lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her proudest accomplishment. She squeezed the hands of her son and daughter and closed her eyes for the final time.
I've never seen anything like it. You're telling me? I heard one of these things hit in Mexico a few days back. How long before military personnel arrive? Should be here within the hour.
The 2 agents stood 100 yards away from a huge, smoldering wreck of metallic spacecraft. One of the agents lifted his binoculars to scan the wreckage once more.
Jeez, is that a car?
He handed his binoculars over to his partner.
Damn.
Crushed underneath the weight of the fallen spacecraft, the 2 agents could barely make out the remains of a smashed-up blue Subaru. It was around 9 when Boyd first heard the sound. It sounded like a low grumble or maybe a low roar, kind of like the sound whales make when they're communicating with each other. He couldn't exactly pinpoint where it was coming from either. Maybe outside? At the door? Near one of the windows? He didn't know. The sound disappeared after a few minutes and he shrugged it off as the wind. The next night around the same time he heard it again. It went on a little longer this time, and now he was certain it was coming from outside the house. It almost sounded like the noise was circling the house. It was too calculated to be the wind. Boyd quietly grabbed his 12-gauge from his closet and stood in the middle of his living room, listening for the noise again. He heard it from behind him and whipped around, pointing the shotgun in the direction of the noise and tracing out the presumed path outside the house. Boyd glanced toward one of the windows and thought he saw what looked like a person moving around outside. A very big person. After a few more minutes, the noise was gone again. Boyd picked up his phone and dialed his neighbor. "Hey, Rich. Just giving you a heads up, I think there's a prowler in my yard. Been hearing weird stuff the past couple of days, and I think I just caught a glimpse of him. With all this stuff going on in the news, that incident a couple of days ago, I don't know, I just want to be careful. Anyways, just figured you should know. Give me a call back when you get the chance. The following night, the noise was a little different. Less of a growl and more of a moan. A little higher pitched. Boyd, shotgun in hand, carefully made his way near one of the windows to hear the sound more clearly. No, not a moan. It almost sounded like words. He something. He-ra? Was the voice saying he runs? After a short while, the unintelligible words stopped. Was there some mental asylum patient stalking his house? Or was it something else? Boyd was awoken in the middle of the night by the voice again. He glanced out the window and saw a large creature moving around outside. The voice was clear now, the words understandable and crisp. The voice was saying, "Hey, Rich. Hey, Rich. Hey, Rich." There was something else strange about it that he couldn't quite put his finger on in his drowsy state. All of a sudden it hit him. Boyd's eyes widened as he realized, and his heartbeat quickened. He grabbed the phone off his nightstand, ran into his room, locked the door, and dialed 911. The voice he had heard was his own. It's been a while since they took over. I have to live my life in hiding now, disguised. I can't let them find me. I can't let them see me. Things were going great for a while. I had a good life. Everyone around me was happy. But then they took over. They wanted to destroy everything we built. Everything we worked for, everything we deserved. They wanted to take what rightfully belonged to us. And eventually they did. We fought back. We fought back for a while, and we succeeded for a time. But it was inevitable. Eventually they took over. But there's still hope. There are other survivors, and eventually we'll take back what's ours. It will take time and planning, but we'll do it. We have to. But for now, I just need to focus on doing what I can to stay alive. Myself and my friends. Because there's only one reason we survived. We made ourselves look like people. Eva always felt that she did not belong. She couldn't pinpoint why exactly. She had a good job, good friends, essentially a good life. She was smart and confident and well-liked. She worked hard and she had fun. And yet she still felt like she was an outsider. She still felt like there was something she was missing. And the feeling only grew with time. She never shared how she felt with anyone. Maybe it was all in her head. Maybe she had some kind of personality disorder. Of course that would explain it, but she had sought medical help and was never diagnosed with a personality or mood disorder. Maybe she just needed something familiar. Something to make her feel at home. She couldn't even remember the last time she was in her hometown with her old friends. She had lost touch with almost all of them, but still had vivid memories of where they would hang out, the places they would go, the things they would do. She remembered how they would hang out at the bowling alley, because inside there was a bar that didn't ID. She remembered the Pine Street CD store and how the manager was cool with them just walking in and hanging out and listening to new CDs for hours so they wouldn't have to buy them. She remembered her and her friends riding their bikes down Main, flying down the street, past the stores, the banks, the big research facility she dreamed of working at, to the old dirt path that led to the lake. It was a time in her life where everything was as it should be. One day, the opportunity finally came for her to visit her hometown. A work assignment would take her right past her old stomping grounds. The perfect opportunity to just sort of stop by and soak in a few memories. Maybe it would make her feel a little better being connected to something. It was a long drive and ever so slightly out of her way, but she finally made it back to her hometown. But as she drove through, she began to notice that almost nothing was how she remembered it. I mean, it had been a long time, and she knew stores and things would change, but it seemed like whole streets were missing, or didn't go in the direction she remembered them going in. The town had the same name, was in the same general area, and many of the streets that were still there had the same name as well. But the layout and flow of the town seemed completely different. Confused, she decided she would stop by one of the stores and inquire about the drastic changes to the town she grew up in. The shopkeeper greeted her as she walked in.
Hey there, miss. How can I help you?
Hi. This is gonna sound a little odd, but I grew up around here, and I was around the area for work and wanted to stop by for old time's sake. And it looks like a lot has changed since I was a kid.
The man gave her a smile.
Well, it's always nice to visit our hometowns.
He then furrowed his brow like he was deep in thought.
Well, I've been here quite some time, and other than some older stores being bought out and a few chain restaurants and retail stores moving in, not much has changed, actually.
Eva was more confused now.
But there had to be some sort of major renovation on the streets, right? A lot of the streets I remember from when I was a kid are just missing or changed. And the layout of the neighborhoods is different too. I can't even find my old house.
No major renovations as far as I know, and like I said, I've been here quite some time.
He peered at her over his glasses.
Actually, if you grew up around here, I'm a little surprised I don't know you. What street did you grow up on?
Juniper, at the end. The rightmost house in the cul-de-sac.
The shopkeeper's look was slowly transitioning from one of confusion to one of concern.
Miss, I know Juniper. That's where the industrial park is. Been there for more than a decade, and before that it was flat land. No houses were ever built on Juniper.
Eva was beginning to panic a little.
But what about the CD shop? The movie theater? The science research facility?
Ma'am, there is no CD shop, and I don't ever remember there being one. Movie theater is long closed, and this town certainly never had a science research facility.
Eva quickly asked the shopkeeper for directions to Juniper and drove there in a haze. He was right. Not only was it not where she remembered it, there was a large industrial park taking up most of the area. Eva sat in her car, confused and exhausted. Her confusion only grew as she slowly pulled out a picture from her wallet. One she had kept to remind her of fond memories from her childhood. One that depicted her, standing in front of her house. The one on the right side of the cul-de-sac, at the end of Juniper Lane.